Hi, sophomores, welcome back. We're about to make history together as we take a look at doing one of our first videos. Now, typically, I will record these the night before and load them up online, and then it's going to be your job to take the notes home, fill them in, and come ready to class. This will allow us more time to do more classroom activities and have more class discussion. So, here we go. Today, we're going to talk about what I'll expect from you with the notes and wanted to do it together in class to give you a sample. Today, as we finish up outliers this week, we're going to go ahead and review back to some statistical studies and add on some extra things now that you've got experience with what Gladwell has done in the book. The first one that I want you to take a look at is the longitudinal studies. Now, this is what researchers use when they want to know the long-term effects of some variable, and they may do periodic tests on participants over a number of years. Now, this is obviously a long study, hence longitudinal, and this wouldn't be a quick, short little case study. This would be studying somebody maybe from first grade through adult years, etc. So these are particularly useful in cases of child development studies because it gives researchers an opportunity to really study a child and what's affected their development. As we go through these different studies, I want your brains to already be ticking and thinking, how has Gladwell used these studies in his book? The next one is cross-sectional studies. Now, in this type of study, participants are chosen from a representative sample of the population. Now, this means that we're looking for people from a variety of ethnic, occupational, socioeconomic, and other groups. Researchers then form conclusions that might be applicable to the entire population. Remember, as good researchers, we don't want to just survey one group of people. If we're really going to get a true study of something, we want to do a cross-sectional study where we're looking at obviously different ethnicities and we are looking at different occupations, different occupations that people have and different socioeconomic levels. So we want to look at the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. We want a grouping of the entire population. Next would be the case study. Now, the case study is unique because these give researchers the opportunity to be in depth with their study, and they're going to go ahead and take a look at just one person with the goal of finding out as much as possible about what factors have influenced his or her development and his or her personality. Case studies can be fascinating. They also can show us the outliers of a group. So if researchers want to take a look at people on an individual level, they're going to go ahead and they're going to focus on case studies. Now, I am not a math whiz, and I can't even believe math is in my lesson, but think about math class, right? A variable, your x or your y, that is anything that can take on different values or qualities. That's why it's called a variable. Well, math teachers like Mr. Whitaker, he loves math statistics because numbers are solid and they don't lie. Well, people unfortunately lie and they skew data. So we've got a lot of variables when it comes to the type of research that Gladwell has done because people can skew results. Now, he has some numbers based variables, but a lot of them are people based. So there are dependent variables and independent variables. Now, dependent variables have to rely or depend on something else to be defined. Independent variables can stand by themselves. Just a quick review of the scientific method because that goes so much with what Gladwell's talking about. He hasn't talked us through his scientific method, but we can see probably where he started and trace it through. I am so sure that you have had this in science classes, and this is just a review, but we'll just go through it quickly. You want to ask a question. Now, these questions might come from your experience, they might come from a previous theory that you've read about, but the whole scientific method starts with a question. Gladwell was wondering, what makes people successful? He set out to figure that out. Next, you want to form a hypothesis. That's your statement that answers the question. So I want you to think, what do you think Gladwell's hypothesis may have been? Now the next step would be to test the hypothesis as well. That would be the research. That's what we see Gladwell doing in all of these studies. He's testing his hypotheses that he makes. Now, if you'll notice too, at the beginning of each section, he kind of has a different hypothesis for each section, which all fall under the umbrella of a successful person. Next, we analyze the data, and we've been doing a lot of that with his charts and his graphs and taking a look at that. And finally, we draw a conclusion. Does indeed this make somebody successful? Now I'm going to pause here for you. Hopefully you're noticing that I am telling you more information than what's popping up on the screen. So guess what? You don't get to mute me. You have to listen to the whole video because I will give you extra information that you will be responsible for as well, and you should be taking extra notes. Now there are key points when you're evaluating research, and we've talked about these. First, you want to take a look at, do participants represent the population being studied? It's all right if you think by aliens looks a little weird, but if you're digging back into our essay writing units, you're starting to remember what filling in by aliens means. And I'm going to be asking you for that here in a minute or two. So first, we want to take a look at, are the participants totally representative of the population that we're studying? If we're studying 16-year-old girls, well, our participants better be a reflection of that, but they better cross over all those different areas of socioeconomic, of race, and different components that go into that to make it a fair study. Was the test population selected randomly? Random is huge when it comes to statistics. It should be a random selection, and we talked about that a little bit with Gladwell's studies. Is the sample size large enough to rule out chance, right? So if I only sample 2 people and I find that one of them does something that's off the wall, well, I didn't sample enough people. Psychology and sociology, especially because people have so many variables about them, we're going to see a lot more chance. So we want to sample enough people where we can identify the patterns, where we can say typically this is what happens. Also, have potential areas for bias on the part of the experimenters and participants been identified and accounted for? Have we taken a look at, okay, yep, Mrs. Pittman probably wants this research to work out a certain way, so she's going to look for something. We've talked about Gladwell being biased in some of his research. And have the researchers avoided bias in their reporting, their processing, and their presenting of their data? Those are the key things that we want to take a look at. All right, geniuses, who has it? What do we put in for by aliens? That was your awkward pause to go ahead and fill that in since I'm standing with you right now. But you are absolutely correct if you said passive voice. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at how these need to be made into active voice. And this is further proof that the science community writes in passive voice a lot. You're going to read that a lot in research, but that's not necessarily the best way for us to write our papers. Today you're going to work with your partner to identify the different types of studies that Gladwell has used, and you're going to also provide examples of the type of study and why it falls into that category.